Hey, it's Skye coming at you again. Another exciting episode of the Guitar Challenge. Today I want to talk briefly about right hand technique again, but this time with the flat pick. And some of the stuff I covered in the tone production episode, so there might be some sort of repeat information here, but I'm going to share a little bit about my flat picking technique. Not that I'm an expert on the subject, but as with the right hand, there's no way I can cover every possibility. I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about what I do and some of my opinions, and make the challenge about you going out and checking out people's right hand that are holding a pick and see how they do it. Because there's a lot of ways to do it, and they're all great. I mean, I see people holding the pick in just ways I can't even imagine, and they're just playing awesome, So, again, I'll share my opinions, and some of them I feel really strongly about, but there's just so many other ways to do it. So you got to figure out what works. As I mentioned before, I like a three corner pick. I like having that rounded edge. Tone wise, I want to get the side of the pick in there. So teardrop or more of a pointy pick doesn't work that well. I currently use a 1.5 millimeter pick by Wiegand. You can go other website. This is a TF140, but special ordered with no holes in it. And instead of, I think the 140 is 1.4, this is 1.5. But I have old tortoiseshell picks and blue chip picks and other things that I like too. But they're almost always about this thickness and about this size or shape. That's what works for me. Again, in the earlier video, I mentioned my right hand technique is usually about kind of angling the pick really two ways. I'm sort of rotating it clockwise, 10 degrees or so, and then I'm taking the top of the pick and kind of leaning it towards the floor a little bit. So the pick is on its own plane, I guess, in two different ways, right? So that's allowing it to move through the strings more cleanly, I think, less resistance. If you hold the pick perfectly straight up and down and you try to move it through the string, I think that's a really hard thing to do. But by rotating it this way, side note, I think George Benson, off the top of my head, rotated it dramatically the other way, and he certainly was a pretty good picker, right? But anyway, getting the pick kind of rotated one way or the other so that it's on its own plane that way will allow it to move through the strings a little bit better and get a much better tone, I think. So, as I said earlier, picking down into the guitar on the downstroke, obviously, back up on the upstroke, getting the string to vibrate more up and down, activating more of the top, rotating the pick clockwise and the top down a little bit. And again, for me, everything is about tone coming first. So I'm trying to get the best sound that I can, the biggest sound that I can. That said, in terms of where I pick, there's some different feels that can be had and certainly different tones. So sometimes I'll pick a little bit closer to the bridge on the first string because just like if you play on the side of a drum head, you get more bounce. So sometimes if I'm going to play fast, I don't play a lot of fast stuff, but if I wanted to, by getting a little closer to the bridge, I feel like I'm less caught up in the string and I'm bouncing off it more. Obviously, it's a different tone. So that's something I think about is, my general placement is kind of around the rosette, the bottom of the sound hole. But for tone reasons, I'll certainly go up here or back there. Again, it's one of the coolest things about this instrument is we have this huge tonal palette just by moving our strings, our pick 6 or 7 inches, right? So it's pretty cool. So really experiment with that. Also, I mentioned in a previous video that I have gone back and forth many times, usually for 6 months at a time, between being a floater, probably not a good term, right? In other words, not touching the face of the guitar at all, and then kind of resting lightly on the face of the guitar. And then I used to, when I was younger, I'd rest on the bridge pins more, but I think that you got to be careful with that. It can change the angle of the pick quite a bit and sort of harder to get a bigger, rounder sound sometimes. And you want to be careful you're not sort of dampening there. So that's my 2 cents about that. Most of these are not original thoughts. In my own study of picking, I quickly figured out that the bluegrassers, they know picking. They spend a lot of time thinking about it. So in particular, I know I'm trying to think. Oh, well, yeah, Brian Sutton, the killer flat picker there. He's got like a lot of videos out and stuff, and where he talks a lot about this kind of stuff. Who else? When I first started learning fiddle tunes and stuff like 15 years ago, I got some books and saw some videos from Steve Kaufman, and I wanted to kind of switch gears to a subject that I think I got hip to from him. And again, I was coming from the jazz world. I'd been playing jazz for a living for many years, and then suddenly somehow got the bug to learn fiddle tunes and stuff. And one of the things that I was really inspired by his picking is the idea of this sort of strict, I guess what you'd call rhythmic picking, which is to play down on a downbeat and up on an upbeat. So it's alternating picking as opposed to like sweep picking or economy picking. Sometimes I'll do those things too, because you should have every tool in your box, For me, those didn't feel as natural, and again, sometimes it felt like a little harder to be in total control of the time, and also sometimes when you have things that are really based on patterns, you start making choices that are based upon completing the pattern rather than really following kind of a legit melodic idea. So anyway, so I was really attracted to the idea of his picking style because this kind of turns your hand into a metronome, basically. So the idea, and again, you could do more research on it. I can't do a whole lesson just on rhythmic picking, but the idea is to play down on a downbeat and up on an upbeat. So if you had 4 quarter notes in a row, you'd be going down, 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 down. And then if you had 8 eighth notes, you'd be going down on the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But on the ands, you'd be going up. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and if you had some combination, like maybe 2 eighth notes and a quarter note or something like down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. But you can go through a whole fiddle tune if you're into that sort of thing, or you can get some classical sheet music or something like that, but just try to play through it and use the rhythmic indicators to do this. But again, it turns your right hand into like a metronome, and it really started quickly bubbling up into my jazz playing in a way that I felt like my time was getting a lot better and my tone had a lot more authority. So that's something that you can look into. Been just really beneficial to me. What else can I say about picking? Well, you can use the pick for more than just playing single notes. A lot of times, like when I'm playing jazz, I don't use a pick. So this is really, for me personally, I only use the pick when I'm playing fiddle tunes. So if I'm playing, well, that's not really a fiddle tune, but let's say I'm playing like a G chord. A lot of times I'll use what they call cross picking, which I think is a very specific thing about like a 3-note pattern that is kind of inspired by a banjo roll. But I think you might expand the definition to include sort of just playing across the strings, like maybe playing a chord, like here I've got a C chord, and maybe I can do it in groups of 3, but you can do it in groups of 5 or groups of 4. But the idea is to sort of play something you might otherwise think of as a fingerstyle thing, just going thumb 1, 2, 3, but using the pick. But the real secret to me is that I think when people first learn to do this kind of thing, they're going to go down, 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 because why not? You're going towards the floor. You might as well keep going. And then when you go up, 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 up. But I think you lose a lot of your control over your tone and your time that way. So the really good cross pickers, like David Greer, if you haven't been turned on to David Greer, you're welcome. Those guys, it's just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So if you can just take a C chord and just do this for a while, and I'm not that fast at it, but there's some bluegrassers that can do this just like hummingbirds. But it's a nice way to accompany besides, just strumming or something. I do some strumming, but in general, I'm not a fan of just strumming guitar. But if I was playing like a C to F kind of thing, I might go. Maybe putting some strums in there. You can hear the kind of rhythm in there, and it's the down, up, down, down, up, down that's allowing me to, emphasize the downs if I want, or the ups or whatever, but it becomes very metronomic. but not in a negative sense. I mean, I think it's, I think you can get very soulful by having a good sense of time. But I digress. But anyway, that's something that I think a lot about with picking, is this idea of cross-picking and using it, maybe a little bit away from the traditional sort of banjo-y thing, but just, using it as accompaniment. But you can take that and incorporate it into whatever you're doing, if you're a singer-songwriter or whatever. Again, like, check out some of David Greer's stuff. I mean, I just think he's unbelievable. One of the great players of our time, clearly. And, notice that he's playing stuff that you might think of as being very complex fingerstyle music, really, if you didn't know. And he's doing it with a pick. So there's a lot of cool things you can do. Strumming-wise, I said earlier, I don't do a lot of strumming, so I don't have a ton to say about it. But usually when I teach someone about strumming with a pick, I'll tell them I think the most important thing is to maybe imagine you're turning a doorknob, so using those muscles, but letting your wrist completely let go, because, you want to be relaxed all the time, right? And then sort of bringing that around to the face of the guitar. So you've taken this movement, right? And then sort of drooping that hand down. So if you were strumming something like, I don't know. So in this case, I'm not really anchoring my fingers. Imagine maybe sometimes using that motion you would use with a wet towel if you were chasing your, or in my case, my 12-year-old son, if you're chasing around the kitchen trying to whip with the towel, right? That kind of motion sometimes. Or if you were doing like a funk thing, you can do it. And if you want to get kind of a faster, flourishy kind of thing, the more of a bend you get in the wrist, you're just using the dead weight of the hand, like... I don't really do that very much, but the idea there is just that you're getting a bend in your wrist and you're just kind of shaking that bad boy around. It's when you straighten the wrist out that I think you run into trouble, because then you're going to kind of get into the elbow, which is great for hammering and stuff, but not we really want to get into the forearm and get more control or whatever. So hopefully that's a little bit of an overview and helpful in some way about how I think about using a pick. But again, as always, the challenge is to go out and do some research and study all the different things that you can do with the pick and try to incorporate that into your own style. All right, have a good one.